The ground shook, crows filled the sky, and somewhere in the chaos a name was whispered, the Morrigan. No one knew if she was blessing the battle or ending it. Warriors feared her, kings called to her, and her shadow still lingers after every war. But who was she really? And why did even the bravest men fall silent at her name? The Morrigan served as the Celtic goddess of war, death, and fate. Her name translates to Phantom Queen, reflecting her ethereal yet commanding presence. Unlike deities who wielded weapons or commanded armies, she determined outcomes before battles commenced. Warriors marched onto fields knowing that if they encountered her presence, their death had already been chosen. This represented a fundamentally different form of power, not the capacity to kill, but the authority to select who would fall. Three interconnected aspects defined her unique role: her function as chooser of the slain, her manifestation as crow on the battlefield, and her position within the sacred cycle governing life and death. Her role as chooser gave meaning to violence. Ancient Celtic warfare was intimate and spiritual. Each confrontation meant facing another person directly, and every death required significance. Morrigan provided that significance through her selections. She transformed random violence into fated necessity. Warriors believed she moved through battlefields before combat began, marking specific individuals for death. Once marked, no action could alter the outcome. This belief generated simultaneous terror and acceptance. Those chosen could face death with composure because resistance proved futile. Those spared could fight without fear because survival was assured regardless of danger. Her crow form made divine judgment visible and immediate. Crows appeared everywhere after battles, feeding on fallen warriors. The Celts recognized these birds not as mere scavengers, but as her direct manifestation. A warrior resting before combat who observed a crow landing nearby understood the sign immediately. That crow signaled the Morrigan's presence and her selection. Other warriors witnessing this recognized their companion's fate. This practice gave abstract death concrete form, transforming the invisible inevitability of mortality into something observable and nameable. The crow served as messenger, witness, and judgment made flesh. Beyond these immediate functions, she embodied the fundamental cycle governing Celtic understanding of existence. Death did not represent an ending, but rather transformation. Blood spilled onto soil provided nourishment. Bodies decomposed and fed new growth. Winter killed vegetation so spring could regenerate. The Morrigan occupied the center of this perpetual wheel. She was not evil, but essential. Warfare pruned populations, removing weakness and creating space for strength. Death cleared room for birth. Destruction prepared ground for creation. She represented existence's necessary dark half that enables the light half to function. Consider how these elements are interconnected. A young Celtic warrior preparing for his first battle experienced terror mixed with hope. He made offerings to the Morrigan, requesting her favor while acknowledging she might select him for either death or survival. On the battle's morning, he observed a crow circling overhead. His uncertainty intensified. Had she marked him? Despite his fear, he fought because his culture taught that dying well honored both tribe and goddess. If he fell, his blood nourished the earth. If he survived, he proved worthy to continue the cycle. Morrigan's choice, the crow's presence, and the sacred cycle wove together into one complete worldview that made peace with mortality. The Morrigan offered the Celts something absent from modern perspectives, a relationship with death grounded in acceptance rather than denial. She embodied terror, but also honesty. She acknowledged death's reality, its inevitability, and its purpose within the larger pattern. With that foundation established, we turn to examine how she existed, not as a single entity, but as three distinct aspects sharing one unified power. The Morrigan's triple nature demonstrates how death arrives through multiple pathways. Understanding her three aspects reveals the Celtic recognition that mortality manifests differently depending on circumstances. The way ancient peoples structured their divine forces illuminates how they comprehended reality's fundamental operations. The Morrigan functioned as one goddess containing three distinct beings. This structure reflected Celtic preference for triads, which represented completeness. Birth, life, and death formed one sequence. Past, present, and future constituted temporal wholeness. The Morrigan embodied this sacred number through three faces: Badb, Macha, and Nemain. Three interconnected manifestations composed her divine identity. Badbi, the harbinger of panic; Macha, the bringer of frenzy; and Nemain, the spreader of chaos. Badbi specialized in panic and bloodshed. Her name translated to crow or vulture, and she presided over the sudden terror that overwhelms warriors when violence begins. Before battles commenced, Celtic accounts describe her scream cutting across assembled armies. This vocalization did not originate from human throats. Warriors hearing it experienced immediate psychological disruption. Discipline collapsed, courage evaporated, clear thinking became impossible. Badbi generated fear that paralyzed even experienced fighters. When she appeared in crow form on battlefields, warriors understood that panic would follow, dissolving organized combat into confused slaughter. Macha brought battle frenzy, the intoxicating energy that makes warriors feel invincible. She connected to horses and speed, embodying the wild power that surges through bodies during combat. This state erased pain awareness and hesitation. Warriors under Macha's influence fought without restraint or caution. They became pure motion and aggression. However, this gift carried danger. Frenzy eliminated judgment along with fear. Warriors felt unstoppable but acted recklessly. They achieved extraordinary feats, then died from preventable mistakes. Celtic mythology describes Macha racing horses while pregnant, defeating them through supernatural speed, then cursing those who forced the competition. Her blessings always included consequences. Nemain governed confusion and madness, representing total cognitive breakdown. She unraveled perception itself. Warriors under her influence could not distinguish allies from enemies. Shapes distorted. Sounds became meaningless. Reality dissolved into incomprehensible chaos. Some accounts describe warriors killing their own companions, while Nemain's power clouded their understanding. She demonstrated death's capacity to destroy minds before bodies. Loss of self preceded physical destruction under her domain. Now observe how these three aspects functioned as one comprehensive system. Consider a Celtic army approaching battle. Badbi arrives first, her scream triggering widespread panic. Half the force freezes, gripped by sudden terror. Then Macha surges through the boldest warriors, filling them with reckless fury. They charge without formation or strategy. Behind these initial effects, Nemain spreads confusion. Orders become garbled. Companions become unrecognizable. The battlefield descends into complete chaos. Together, panic eliminates discipline, frenzy eliminates caution, and confusion eliminates understanding. Nothing remains except death. This structural sophistication matched reality. Death arrives through different mechanisms. Sometimes sudden fear paralyzes. Sometimes false confidence leads to fatal errors. Sometimes total disorientation prevents appropriate responses. The Morrigan's three faces named these variations and gave them divine form. Warriors could relate to different aspects depending on their experiences and needs. This complexity created space for varied worship and multiple forms of petition. The triple structure also embedded deeper meaning. Celtic warriors recognized that dismissing any aspect of death meant incomplete understanding. Focusing only on courage ignored panic's reality. Emphasizing only discipline ignored frenzy's power. Pretending clarity always prevailed ignored confusion's existence. The Morrigan's three faces demanded comprehensive acknowledgement of how mortality operated. Having established her triple nature, we proceed to examine her most prominent and feared manifestation, the crow that signaled death's approach. The crow became the Morrigan's primary visible form, transforming an ordinary bird into a symbol that could alter warriors' fates. Understanding this association reveals how the Celts created meaning through natural observation. Crows appeared predictably after battles, and that consistency generated mythological significance. What elevated crows beyond ordinary scavengers? These birds possessed characteristics that aligned perfectly with death's attributes. Crows fed on corpses, appearing wherever violence occurred. They displayed intelligence, remembering faces and communicating complex information to other crows. They thrived in liminal spaces between civilization and wilderness. Most significantly, they were omnipresent. Warriors could not avoid encountering crows, which meant they constantly faced potential omens. 3 dimensions define the crow's mythological role: serving as omen, functioning as witness, and embodying transformation. As omen, crows provided warriors with tangible signs regarding their fate. Celtic culture emphasized reading natural phenomena for divine messages. Weather patterns, animal behavior, and unusual occurrences all carried potential significance. Crows landing near warriors before battle became the most dreaded omen. This sign indicated the Morrigan had marked that individual for death. The omen's specificity mattered, not crows in general, but a crow approaching an individual warrior. This personal attention from the death goddess through her animal form meant selection had occurred. Warriors observing this omen understood their fate was sealed, friends and companions witnessing the same sign prepared for that warrior's death. As a witness, crows transformed dying from an isolated experience into a divinely observed event. Mortality's terror includes the fear of dying alone, unmourned, mattering to no one. The Morrigan's crow's presence addressed this anxiety directly. When death arrived on Celtic battlefields, she watched through crow eyes. This meant warriors died under divine attention. Their deaths possessed cosmic significance rather than random meaninglessness. They were not merely bodies falling in mud. They were chosen sacrifices, souls personally collected by a goddess. Crows landing on newly dead warriors signified the Morrigan claiming what belonged to her. This transformed slaughter into sacred ceremony. As embodiment of transformation, crows demonstrated that death meant change rather than cessation. The Celts believed souls moved between different forms after physical death. Bodies were temporary vessels. Consciousness continued through various manifestations. The Morrigan's ability to shift between woman and crow proved this fluidity. She existed in multiple forms while retaining identity. Warriors understanding this principle could face death differently. Their current form would end, but essence would continue in new configurations, perhaps as crows themselves, perhaps as stones, trees, or rivers, perhaps as future warriors. The crow made the transformation visible and real. These 3 dimensions operated simultaneously. A warrior observed a crow landing nearby before battle. The omen announced his selection for death. Then understanding arrived. The Morrigan herself, through this crow, would witness his dying. Finally, the deeper meaning emerged. That crow showed him his future, transformation from warrior into something else. Fear, significance, and acceptance flowed in sequence. Celtic texts document these crow encounters repeatedly. The cattle raid of Cooley mentions crows appearing before major conflicts. The Book of Invasions describes the Morrigan assuming crow form to survey armies. Archaeological evidence supports mythological accounts. Burial sites across Ireland and Britain contain crow bones placed alongside human remains, indicating ritualized connections between birds and death. Warriors incorporated crow feathers into equipment. Craftspeople carved crow images onto weapons and shields. The bird permeated Celtic death culture because the association functioned effectively. Crows possessed intelligence that reinforced divine connection. These birds solved problems, remembered individuals, and coordinated group behavior. Warriors observing such sophistication recognized capabilities beyond ordinary animals. This intelligence made crows suitable vessels for a goddess who understood fate and prophecy. They were not mindless scavengers but aware beings participating in larger patterns. The crow omen also created self-reinforcing belief. Warriors convinced of their approaching death through crow sightings might fight recklessly or freeze with fear. Either response increased death probability of death. When predicted deaths occurred, survivors remembered the crow's presence. The omen's apparent accuracy strengthened mythology. The Morrigan's power grew through the very beliefs it generated. From understanding her crow manifestation, we move to her most significant mythological narrative, where she offered aid to Ireland's greatest hero, and he rejected her. The tale of the Morrigan and Cuchulainn demonstrates how Celtic culture understood relationships between mortals and divine forces. This narrative teaches about respect, pride, and consequences. The story functioned as cultural instruction, warning against the hubris that rejects necessary connections to powers governing existence. Cuchulainn represented Ireland's supreme warrior. He defended Ulster single-handedly against entire armies. His strength bordered on supernatural. He killed a giant hound as a youth and adopted its name. In combat, he entered states of battle fury so intense his body transformed. He was proud, extraordinarily capable, and convinced of his self-sufficiency. These qualities made him both Ireland's protector and the perfect subject for the Morrigan's lesson. 3 sequential moments structured this story: the offer, the rejection, and the retribution. The offer occurred before Cuchulainn's final battle. The Morrigan appeared in the form of a beautiful woman and offered him her love and aid. This was not a casual romantic interest. As the goddess controlling battle outcomes, her offer meant guaranteed victory and survival. Her love provided divine protection. Her aid ensured success. Any warrior comprehending her identity would have accepted immediately with gratitude and reverence. Cuchulainn refused. Various textual versions record his response differently, but the core message remained consistent. He stated he required no assistance from women. His own strength sufficed. He fought for tangible goals like honor and land, not for goddesses. Some accounts have him claiming excessive busyness for romance. Others show him dismissing her as a distraction. The specific words mattered less than the fundamental action. He rejected divine assistance because his pride insisted he needed nothing beyond personal power. He insulted Morrigan by treating her offer as worthless. This rejection revealed catastrophic misunderstanding. The goddess of fate extended mercy, offering escape from certain death. He spurned that mercy because pride overruled wisdom. Celtic audiences hearing this tale would have recognized the magnitude of his error. Their culture emphasized proper relationships with divine forces. Refusing gods meant inviting disaster. Insulting death's goddess meant choosing death. This was not bravery, but pride disguised as confidence. The retribution came swiftly through three forms. The Morrigan returned during Cuchulain's final battle, not as a woman, but as three animals. First, she became an eel and entangled his legs while he fought in a river. He struck her, breaking ribs. Second, she transformed into a wolf and stampeded cattle through the battlefield, creating chaos. He struck her, destroying an eye. Third, she became a hornless red cow leading the stampede. He struck her, breaking a leg. Each wound would have killed an ordinary creature. She endured them while teaching him about consequences. Finally, as Cuchulainn died, tied to a standing stone to remain upright, the Morrigan landed on his shoulder in crow form. This sign announced death's arrival. Other warriors observing the crow understood his fate was sealed. The Morrigan had claimed him. He refused her love, so she delivered death instead. These three moments created a complete moral instruction. The offer demonstrated divine mercy. The rejection demonstrated human pride. The retribution demonstrated cosmic justice. Together, they conveyed essential teaching. Respect forces governing existence. Even supreme heroes fall when insulting divine powers. Even the greatest warriors die when believing themselves entirely self-sufficient. Pride proves more lethal than any weapon. However, the story contains additional complexity regarding the Morrigan's nature. She offered genuine assistance. This was not deception or manipulation. She sincerely extended help. When refused, she did not respond with immediate fury. During his final battle, she appeared multiple times in different animal forms. Each manifestation represented another opportunity for recognition, apology, and request for mercy. He continued attacking. Only after repeated rejection and injury did she finally claim him. This demonstrates the Morrigan possessed complexity beyond simple vengeance. She wanted to save him. He prevented his own salvation. The tale also embedded teaching about gender and power. Cuchulainn specifically rejected assistance from women. His dismissal based on gender became his doom. The Morrigan demonstrated that divine feminine power exceeded mortal masculine strength. Dismissing female force based on gender assumptions proved fatally foolish. Celtic culture embedded this lesson directly into their greatest hero's death story. The instruction was deliberate and clear. Additionally, the story showed the Morrigan's dual capacity for creation and destruction. She offered to create victory and preserve life. When refused, she created defeat and delivered death. She could build or break, protect or destroy. This duality made her worship essential. Warriors wanted her to create on their behalf, not destroy them. Cuchulainn learned this distinction too late. The narrative functioned practically within Celtic society. Young warriors heard it and learned to honor deities, especially goddesses, especially the Morrigan. They learned that offers of divine aid must be accepted with respect. Parents taught it to children as a warning against arrogance. Priests referenced it during rituals as evidence of the Morrigan's reach and authority. The story became a cultural tool for teaching proper relationships between mortals and divine forces. Having examined her most famous mythological appearance, we now explore her prophetic abilities and how foresight amplified her power. The Morrigan's capacity to perceive and speak about future events elevated her beyond a simple war goddess. Understanding her prophetic function reveals Celtic attitudes toward fate, knowledge, and the burden of foresight. Prophecy created both desire and dread because knowing the future carried its own weight. What distinguished the Morrigan as a prophet Her power transcended choosing who died. She perceived what would occur before events unfolded. She knew which armies would fall, which heroes would rise, which battles would reshape territories. She spoke these visions, sometimes directly, often through riddles, always truthfully. Warriors desired hearing their futures, but simultaneously feared that knowledge. 3 aspects defined her prophetic role: the nature of her foresight, the delivery method, and the consequences of prophecy. Her foresight demonstrated complete temporal perception. The Morrigan did not guess or estimate. She perceived. Her prophecies originated from direct observation of future events, not calculation of probabilities. Celtic texts describe her standing before armies and reciting detailed visions of approaching battles. She named who would fall. She described combat progression. She revealed which side would claim victory. Her accuracy was absolute. This perfection made prophecies more frightening than comforting, even when predicting survival. Knowing outcomes removed uncertainty, but also removed hope. If she declared death, no skill or courage could alter that fate. If she promised survival, the terror of battle remained despite the assured outcome. Either way, knowledge bound listeners to predetermined futures. The most renowned prophecy appears in the cattle raid of Cooley. Queen Medb of Connaught encountered the Morrigan before invading Ulster. Medb requested foresight. The Morrigan described a vision saturated with red. Everything is covered in crimson. Warriors drowning in blood. The plain soaked with death. She saw the hero Cuchulainn standing alone against the entire army. She saw the slaughter he would inflict. She told Medb that while Connaught might achieve its objective of capturing the Great Bull, the cost in lives would be catastrophic. Medb ignored this warning and invaded. Everything Morrigan foretold occurred exactly. The battle became legendary for bloodshed. Cuchulainn killed hundreds. The plain ran red with blood. Prophecy fulfilled completely. Her delivery method employed language that challenged and concealed. The Morrigan rarely spoke plainly. She used poetry, metaphor, and riddles. She might say, "Rivers will run red," instead of stating men will die. She might say the crow will feast rather than declaring, "I will choose many for death." This riddling quality served multiple functions. It protected divine knowledge from casual comprehension. It forced listeners to engage, interpret, and think deeply. It left space for hope within doom, because perhaps the meaning differed from immediate interpretation. Primarily, it reflected how divine knowledge operated differently from mortal understanding. Gods perceived connections and patterns invisible to humans. Prophecy spoke through symbols because symbols better captured fate's complexity. Warriors hearing Morrigan speak knew she revealed a genuine future, but struggled to understand precise meaning. Should they march to battle or remain home? Would they survive or die? Her words provided information that increased anxiety rather than reducing it. Knowledge remained incomplete while awareness grew. This tension between knowing and not knowing generated profound psychological stress. The consequences of prophecy demonstrated that foreknowledge shaped outcomes. Philosophical complexity emerged here. Did the Morrigan perceive futures because they were already determined? Or did speaking futures make them determined? Celtic belief held both concepts simultaneously. Fate existed as real force independent of mortal action. Yet prophecy also influenced behavior in ways that fulfilled predictions. If the Morrigan told warriors they would die honorably, they might fight more bravely, increasing the probability of honorable death. If she told an army they would lose, morale might collapse, ensuring defeat. Prophecy and outcome fed into each other circularly. One tale illustrates this perfectly. A king heard the Morrigan prophesy his son would die by drowning. Desperate to prevent this, the king kept his son away from all water throughout life. The son never learned to swim. During a feast, a servant spilled wine. The son slipped in the liquid, struck his head on a wine barrel, and drowned, inhaling wine into his lungs. Prophecy was fulfilled despite all prevention efforts, partially because those very efforts created the fulfilling circumstances. These three aspects function together within Celtic culture. Warriors needed to know their fates, but feared that knowledge. They sought the Morrigan's prophecies before battles, making offerings at sacred sites, requesting glimpses of the future. She might appear to some individuals, might speak through druids, might send omens requiring interpretation. Her prophecies arrived wrapped in poetry and symbols, leaving warriors uncertain even after receiving answers. Then, armed with incomplete knowledge, they marched to combat. Some fought harder because she predicted victory. Some lost hope because she predicted doom. All knew, deeply, that whatever she declared would manifest. Prophecy shaped actions, which shaped outcomes, which proved prophecy accurate. Consider how this system granted the Morrigan immense societal power. Political leaders consulted her prophecies before major decisions. Should we attack neighbors? Should we form alliances? Should we plant crops in specific locations? Her words guided more than warfare. They influenced agriculture, migration, law, and all significant choices. A goddess who knows the future becomes the ultimate authority because she reveals what succeeds and what fails. No king, regardless of military strength, could match that power. Physical might controls present circumstances. Prophecy controls future possibilities. The Celts also understood prophecy as a burden on the prophet. The Morrigan carried knowledge no mortal could sustain. She perceived every death before it occurred. She watched futures unfold mentally while present events continued. She knew which prayers would go unanswered, which hopes would shatter, which loves would end in grief. That knowledge created isolation. Relationships become difficult when you already know how they conclude. Surprise and wonder disappear when everything is already known. Her prophetic gift provided power, but enforced solitary existence in eternal awareness. This understanding explains why warriors simultaneously worshipped and feared her. They wanted her knowledge, but recognized its weight. They sought her prophecies while dreading reception. They honored her power while hoping she would remain distant. Relationships with prophetic deities could never be comfortable or simple. Prophecy creates separation. It makes the prophet fundamentally other, disconnected from those living in uncertainty. From examining prophecy's function, we turn to the Morrigan's essential role within the cycle of destruction and renewal governing Celtic cosmology. The Morrigan occupied a crucial position within the perpetual cycle the Celts recognized as governing existence. Understanding her role in destruction and renewal reveals sophisticated ecological and spiritual wisdom. The Celts refused to separate death from life, recognizing them as interdependent phases within one continuous process. What defines this sacred cycle? The Celts perceived existence as a wheel constantly turning. Growth, maturity, decay, death, and rebirth followed one another endlessly. Nothing remained static. Everything flowed. Crucially, each stage fed subsequent stages. Death was not life's opposite, but life's essential partner and fuel. Bodies decomposed and enriched soil. Enriched soil grew better crops. Those crops fed people and animals. Those fed beings eventually died and returned nutrients to soil. The wheel turned perpetually. The Morrigan stood at the cycle's dark edge, where things fell apart so new things could emerge. 3 interconnected concepts defined her role: blood as fertilizer, war as pruning, and chaos as preparation. Blood as fertilizer reflected agricultural reality. The Celts farmed extensively. They understood that healthy soil produced abundant crops, while depleted soil generated failure and hunger. They also observed that organic matter, including bodies and blood, enriched soil composition. When warriors died on battlefields, their bodies decomposed in place, returning nutrients to earth. Grass grew greener where battles had occurred. Trees near burial sites grew fuller and stronger. This was not superstition, but observation of natural processes. Dead matter feeds growing matter. This principle operated constantly. The Morrigan embodied this truth divinely. When she chose warriors to die, she literally fed the earth. Blood spilled under her selection soaked into ground and became nourishment. She transformed the living warriors into soil fertilizer. Some Celtic texts describe her washing bodies and armor of those about to die in rivers. This washing symbolized preparation for return to earth. She cleansed them, blessed them, and readied them to become food for land. Dying in battle under Morrigan's observation meant participating in cosmic agriculture. Death served the tribe's survival through nourishing the soil that would grow next season's food. This understanding offered comfort. Warriors facing death knew their blood would enrich soil. Their decomposing bodies would help wheat grow taller. Their deaths served tribal survival even after they stopped breathing. That gave meaning transcending glory or honor. It made death ecologically essential. The Morrigan's function as death goddess connected directly to renewal. She embodied both simultaneously. One could not exist without the other. War as pruning applied similar logic to population management. The Celts experienced constant tribal conflict. Resources were limited. Land was contested. Populations grew. War addressed problems that peace could not solve. The Celts recognized this clearly. Excessive population competing for insufficient resources meant universal suffering. War reduced numbers. War removed weak and incompetent individuals. War created space for strong individuals to thrive. The Morrigan, through choosing who died, functioned as gardener. She pruned human populations, cutting away excess so remaining growth stayed healthy. This was not cruelty, but resource management. Tribes growing too large faced starvation. Tribes protecting weak warriors through avoiding combat eventually lost when fighting became unavoidable. The Morrigan's selective death maintained balance. She ensured populations remained sustainable, that resources matched needs, that only capable individuals survived to reproduce. Modern ecology describes similar patterns using different terminology. Predators control prey populations. Without predators, prey overpopulate, destroy environments, then crash catastrophically. The Morrigan functioned as apex predator for human populations, maintaining sustainable numbers through selective death. Warriors understood this. They recognized that not everyone could or should survive every battle. They accepted that some population reduction was necessary. The Morrigan made that reduction sacred rather than random. She gave structure to violence that would occur anyway. Warriors preferred dying under a goddess's gaze, who understood necessity rather than dying meaninglessly in chaos. Chaos as preparation recognized that destruction creates space for new patterns. The Celts understood that old orders became rigid and stagnant. Old methods stopped working. Old leaders clung to power beyond useful service. Chaos broke everything apart. War shattered existing structures. Death removed outdated elements. The Morrigan's chaos was purposeful, not random. It prepared ground for new growth, new order, new possibilities. Celtic political systems depended on this cycle. Leaders rose by demonstrating capability, often through combat. When leaders weakened, younger rivals challenged them. These challenges became violent frequently. The Morrigan oversaw these transitions. She marked which leader would fall and which would rise. Her chaos created space for fresh leadership. Without this cycle, society stagnated. With it, each generation brought new energy and adaptation. These three concepts flowed together seamlessly. Consider a Celtic tribe facing difficult circumstances. Crops failed. Games grew scarce. Too many people competed for insufficient resources. Conflict with neighboring tribes escalated into war. Warriors marched to battle. The Morrigan appeared and chose who would die. Those individuals fell. Their blood soaked the battlefield. Their bodies fed the soil. Next year's crops grew better in that enriched earth. Meanwhile, war reduced the tribal population to match available resources. The strongest warriors survived. Proven leaders emerged. The old order that failed to prevent the crisis collapsed. Chaos came and departed. The Morrigan presided over the entire cycle. Destruction, fertility, pruning, renewal, all contained within one process. This explains why Celts worshipped her despite terror. She was not evil but necessary. She was winter, which must precede spring. She was fire clearing dead wood so forests regenerate. She was the harsh truth that not everything survives, and that reality is natural and acceptable. They feared her while honoring her, because you fear necessary things that cause pain, even while recognizing their importance. Celtic attitudes toward death differed fundamentally from modern perspectives. Contemporary culture attempts to sanitize death, hide it, pretend it is not natural or necessary. Modern discourse speaks of conquering death, defeating it, avoiding it entirely. The Celts would have found this incomprehensible. Death cannot be conquered because it is part of the cycle making life possible. Fighting death means fighting life itself. The Morrigan taught acceptance of mortality not as defeat, but as participation in something larger than individual existence. Her chaos also contained justice. She did not discriminate based on wealth or status. Kings died in battle alongside common warriors. The strongest sometimes fell while weaker individuals survived. Her choices followed patterns mortals could not predict or manipulate. This unpredictability within purpose meant no one could circumvent the system. Warriors could not purchase escape from her attention. They could not bribe her for mercy. All they could do was fight well, die well if chosen, and trust that their death served the larger cycle. Having understood her role in destruction and renewal, we examine how the Morrigan related to other Celtic deities within the larger pantheon. The Morrigan did not exist in isolation. Understanding her relationships with other Celtic deities reveals how ancient peoples created complete systems of meaning, where each divine figure filled specific functions. Balance emerged through complementary forces, with the Morrigan providing necessary darkness. Where did Morrigan stand among other gods? The Celtic pantheon contained numerous deities, each governing different aspects of existence. The Dagda ruled as the father god of wisdom, fertility, and abundance. Brigid embodied poetry, healing, and smithcraft. Lu mastered all skills and arts. Danu mothered the gods themselves. Among these powerful beings, the Morrigan held a unique position as necessary darkness, the death that balanced their light and life. Three key connections illuminated her role: her partnership with the Dagda, her contrast with Brigid, and her special prominence during Samhain. Her partnership with the Dagda created one of Celtic mythology's most symbolically important unions. The Dagda represented a generative life force. He carried a club that could kill with one end and resurrect with the other. He owned a cauldron that never emptied, feeding everyone requiring sustenance. He embodied abundance, fertility, wisdom, and protection. He was the good father who provided for his people. Pairing him with the Morrigan, goddess of death and battle, created balance. The complete cycle, creation and destruction united. Myths describe them meeting before the Battle of Moytura, one of Celtic legend's most significant conflicts. They coupled physically, and this union symbolized the necessary connection between life and death, growth and decay, beginning and ending. Neither could function without the other. The Dagda's abundance meant nothing without the Morrigan's pruning. Her death meant nothing without his renewal. Together, they formed wholeness. This pairing taught that opposites are partners, not enemies. Continuous growth cannot occur. Things must die to create space. Only death cannot sustain. Things must grow to provide what death will harvest. The Dagda and the Morrigan's relationship modeled this interdependence. Worshippers honoring one needed to honor the other, requesting abundant crops from the Dagda, while ignoring the Morrigan's role in clearing old growth to make space was inconsistent. Practically, farmers worshipped the Dagda during planting season, requesting growth. But before planting, they acknowledged the Morrigan, thanking her for winter that killed pests and diseases, for decay that enriched soil, for deaths that created fertilizer feeding current crops. The cycle required both deities participating actively. Their mythological coupling reflected real ecological relationships. Her contrast with Brigid highlighted the dual nature of feminine divine power. Brigid shone as the beloved goddess of healing, poetry, and craft. She brought light, warmth, and inspiration. Mothers prayed to Brigid when children fell ill. Poets invoked Brigid when seeking words. Smiths honored Brigid when forging tools. She represented everything nurturing and creative about existence. She improved things. She healed wounds. She inspired beauty. The Morrigan represented the opposite pole. She brought death, ended things, and presided over violence. When Brigid healed, the Morrigan was wounded. Where Brigid inspired poetry celebrating life, the Morrigan inspired war cries calling for death. Where Brigid's domain included hearth and home, the Morrigan's territory encompassed battlefield and burial ground. Yet both were essential feminine powers. Both commanded worship and respect. Both were goddesses, not demons. This pairing taught crucial understanding about Celtic views of femininity. Modern culture sometimes attempts to make women only nurturers, only gentle, only life-giving. The Celts knew better. Feminine power included both Brigid and the Morrigan. It included healing and harm. It included creation and destruction. Women could be mothers like Brigid and warriors like the Morrigan. Both aspects were equally divine, equally necessary, equally worthy of honor. The contrast between these goddesses did not diminish either. It showed completeness. Warriors praying before battle might invoke both. They would ask Brigid to preserve life and heal wounds. They would ask the Morrigan to choose enemies for death instead of themselves. Both prayers were valid. Both goddesses could help. The Celts perceived no contradiction in requesting aid from life and death goddesses simultaneously. They understood survival required both forces working favorably. Her special role during Samhain connected her to the Celtic New Year and boundary dissolution. Samhain occurred on what is now October 31st and November 1st. The Celts marked this as the year's end and beginning, the moment when summer's growth yielded to winter's death. During Samhain, they believed the barrier between the living world and other world dissolved. Spirits could cross over. The dead could return. The Morrigan's power peaked. Why Samhain? Because that liminal time, that threshold between year and year, between life season and death season, belonged to her. She governed transitions, especially the ultimate transition from living to dead. When the entire world transitioned from one state to another, her presence intensified. Celtic families made offerings at Samhain, specifically to honor her and seek favor for the coming year. They left food at crossroads, three-way intersections sacred to her triple nature. They lit fires to guide wandering spirits and appease the Morrigan's aspects. Samhain rituals often included warriors and leaders consulting omens to determine the coming year's fate. Would there be war? Would crops fail? Would tribes face a crisis? They looked for signs from the Morrigan, because her prophetic powers ran strongest when veils were thin. Crows appearing during Samhain ceremonies carried extra significance. Her voice in the wind spoke more clearly. Her prophecies came more readily. These three relationships functioned together in Celtic religious practice. The Dagda and the Morrigan's union demonstrated that life and death must partner. Brigid and the Morrigan's contrast showed that feminine divinity contained multitudes. Samhain gave the Morrigan her season of peak influence. Together, these relationships positioned her as essential, not optional. Celtic spirituality could not function while ignoring the death goddess. She was not a minor figure or a frightening story. She was central. Consider also how her role differed from war gods in other cultures. Greeks had Ares, brutal and impulsive, constantly fighting. Romans had Mars, disciplined and strategic, leading armies. Norse had Odin, Thor and Tyr, each with warrior aspects. The Morrigan stood apart from all of them. She did not fight. She decided. She did not lead armies. She chose outcomes. She did not value martial prowess for its own sake. She used death as a tool for maintaining cosmic balance. Her role was more sophisticated than a simple war deity. She was fate, prophecy, transformation, and renewal, with war as just one method. This sophistication reflected Celtic culture's complexity. They were not simple barbarians obsessed with violence. They were farmers, craftspeople, poets, and philosophers who were also warriors. Their gods reflected this complexity. The Morrigan contained layers of meaning pure war gods lacked. She challenged worshippers to think deeply about death's purpose and necessity. Her position in the pantheon meant she received ongoing worship, not just emergency prayers before battles. Tribes maintained sacred sites dedicated to her. Priestesses served her throughout the year. Festivals honored her at specific times. She was woven into Celtic religious life as deeply as any god of life or light. Her darkness balanced their brightness. Her endings enabled their beginnings. From understanding her role among gods, we move to examining physical evidence of her worship. Archaeological evidence grounds mythology in material reality. Understanding physical traces of the Morrigan's worship proves she was not merely an abstract concept, but an active presence in Celtic life. Real places, real offerings, and real rituals demonstrate how deeply she influenced daily existence. What evidence remains of her worship? Unlike Mediterranean religions with grand temples and extensive writings, Celtic religion left subtler traces. Celts built in wood, not stone. They transmitted knowledge orally, not through books. They practiced faith in natural settings, rivers, groves, and hilltops. Nevertheless, archaeology reveals patterns. Offerings, ritual sites, inscriptions, and objects point directly to the Morrigan's importance in Celtic religious life. Three types of evidence illuminate her worship: sacred locations, ritual offerings, and material culture, Sacred locations show where Celts believed Morrigan's power concentrated. Rivers held special significance. Celts considered water a boundary between worlds. Rivers specifically symbolized life and death flowing together. Blood flows like water. Water cleanses bodies. Rivers carry things away, just as death carries souls to the other world. Multiple sites along Irish rivers show evidence of ritual activity connected to war and death deities. The River Boyne, the Shannon, and others all became places where Celts made offerings to powers like the Morrigan. These were not casual locations. They were carefully chosen sites where the barrier between physical and spiritual felt thin. Natural features like waterfalls, deep pools, and river bends attracted ritual attention. Archaeology reveals weapon deposits at these sites, deliberately broken and submerged. Warriors threw valuable swords and spears into water as offerings. These weapons were not accidentally lost. They were given to gods, specifically to goddesses like the Morrigan, who governed war outcomes. Crossroads formed another type of sacred location. The Morrigan's triple nature found perfect representation in 3 road meetings. Crossroads also symbolized choice and fate. Which path do you take? The Morrigan decided. Celtic people left offerings at crossroads, especially during Samhain when her power peaked. Food, weapons, and animal remains were deposited at 3-way intersections. Some offerings were buried, others were left exposed. The act of placing them at crossroads was what mattered, marking the spot as belonging to her. Battlefields themselves became sacred to the Morrigan. After conflicts ended, sites of major battles received ongoing ritual attention for generations. Ground soaked with blood became charged with her presence. Celts returned to these places to make offerings, remember the dead, and seek her favor. They believed spirits of fallen warriors lingered at battlefields, and the Morrigan moved among those spirits in crow form. Archaeological excavations of ancient Celtic battlefields have found ritual deposits placed long after fighting ended, suggesting continuous worship at these locations. Ritual offerings reveal what Celts believed the Morrigan valued. Weapons dominate archaeological records. Swords, spears, and shields, all deliberately damaged before being offered. Why damage them? Several reasons operated together. Breaking a weapon ritually killed it, allowing its spirit to travel to the other world along with warrior spirits. It also prevented anyone from retrieving and reusing offerings, keeping them sacred. And it demonstrated commitment. A broken sword could not be reclaimed. The offering was final and complete. Animal bones appear frequently in sites associated with the Morrigan. Crows naturally, but also horses, cattle, dogs, and boars. These animals connected to different aspects of war and death. Horses represented speed and warrior status. Cattle represented wealth worth fighting for. Dogs symbolized loyalty unto death. Boars embodied fierce courage. Offering these animals remains honored the Morrigan while also requesting those qualities for warriors or favor for specific ventures. Bones were often burned and ashes scattered or buried, releasing the animal's essence to the goddess. Human remains present more complex evidence. Some sites contain what appeared to be sacrificial deposits. Celts practiced limited human sacrifice, though less commonly than Roman propaganda suggested. When they did sacrifice humans, it was for serious reasons, averting catastrophe, ensuring victory in crucial battles, or sealing major oaths. The Morrigan, as death's goddess, would receive such ultimate offerings. Bodies found in ritual contexts often show signs of violent death, followed by careful placement, not casual disposal. This suggests ceremonial killing dedicated to her. Material culture shows how Morrigan's imagery permeated Celtic life. Jewellery, especially brooches and pins, sometimes featured crow designs. Warriors wore these as both decoration and protection. Having the Morrigan symbol on your body meant carrying her presence into battle. It demonstrated devotion and requested favour. Some brooches are quite elaborate, showing skilled craftspeople dedicated their best work to her imagery. Weapons bear her symbols as well. Sword hilts carved with crow heads, shields painted with black birds, and spear shafts inscribed with invocations all appeared. Warriors personalized weapons with the Morrigan's marks, transforming ordinary tools into sacred objects. This made fighting a religious act. Raising a spear marked with her crow meant channeling her power, becoming her instrument. The weapon became a bridge between mortal violence and divine purpose. Coins from Celtic regions sometimes show crow imagery, particularly coins from tribes known for warrior culture. Currency might seem unusual for death goddess symbolism, but it makes sense. Coins represented value and exchange. Warriors received payment for service. The Morrigan decided whether they would live to spend that payment. Marking coins with her symbols acknowledged her power over warriors' fates and fortunes. It also made every transaction a small recognition of her presence in Celtic life. Now, connect these three evidence types. Picture a Celtic warrior preparing for battle. He travels first to the river, a sacred boundary place. There he deposits his finest dagger, broken and surrendered to water, to the Morrigan dwelling beneath. He prays for survival, or failing that, for honourable death. He wears his crow-marked brooch and carries his crow-headed sword. On the march to battle, he passes through a crossroads where his tribe left offerings to the previous Samhain. He adds a small bundle of food to honour the Morrigan's triple aspect. During battle, he fights knowing she watches. If he falls, his body may be left on the field temporarily, so her crows can claim first share. His weapons will be broken and offered at the battlefield itself, which will become a permanent sacred site. Every step, from preparation through death to memorial, involves physical actions in physical places with physical objects. The Morrigan's worship was concrete, material, embedded in landscape and practice. This material evidence proves the Morrigan meant more than abstract concepts. She was an actionable reality. Celts spent resources on her worship. They travelled to her sites. They made costly offerings. They incorporated her imagery into daily use objects. She shaped their physical world as much as their spiritual understanding. This integration of belief and practice, myth and material, created a complete religious system where death's goddess remained constantly present and relevant. Archaeological work continues revealing new sites and artifacts. Each discovery adds detail to our understanding of how Celts worshipped and what they valued. The Morrigan emerges from these findings as central rather than peripheral, as actively worshipped rather than simply feared. Physical evidence confirms what myth suggested. She was essential to Celtic life and thought. Having seen concrete evidence of her worship, we explore how the Morrigan survived Celtic paganism's end and transformed into new forms persisting today. Cultural survival reveals adaptation and resilience. Understanding how the Morrigan transformed from pagan goddess into folklore figure and modern symbol demonstrates that powerful ideas persist beyond religious change. Deep embedding in Irish culture allowed her to survive persecution and reinterpretation, remaining relevant across 1500 years. What happened to the Morrigan when Christianity arrived? Starting around the 5th century, Christian missionaries moved through Ireland, converting Celtic peoples. Old gods faced extinction or adaptation. Many Celtic deities vanished from active worship within a few generations. Their temples became churches. Their feast days became Christian holidays. Their stories were forgotten or deliberately erased. The Morrigan survived. She changed shape, shifted roles, and re-emerged in new forms that preserved essential nature while fitting Christian Ireland's framework. 3 transformations trace her survival: evolution into the banshee, persistence in Crow folklore, and modern revival. The banshee became the Morrigan's most successful adaptation. The word derives from Irish bean cedar, meaning woman of the fairy mound. In Irish folklore, the banshee appears as a female spirit whose wailing warns that someone in the family will soon die. She is described as either a beautiful young woman or an old hag dressed in grey, white, or sometimes green. She does not cause death. She announces it. Her cry, the iconic wail, signals that death has already chosen someone. The family must prepare. The Morrigan's essence permeates this description. Prophecy of death. Role as announcer rather than killer. Connection to fate and doom. The banshee preserved the Morrigan's core function, while stripping explicitly pagan elements. Christian Ireland could not worship a goddess, but they could fear a spirit. They could not pray to her, but they could listen for her warning. The banshee gave post-pagan Irish people a way to maintain ancestral relationship with death omens without challenging Christian doctrine. Some families claim specific banshees attached to their lineage. These family banshees would appear only when death approached someone with that surname. This made the banshee personal and inherited, passed through generations, just like the Morrigan's attention to certain warrior lines. The belief was so strong that Irish emigrants brought banshee stories to America, Australia, and wherever they settled. Even in the 20th century, Irish families reported hearing the wail before deaths occurred. The Morrigan's prophetic power, softened and Christianized, lived on. The banshee's appearance also echoed the Morrigan's shape-shifting, sometimes young, sometimes old, sometimes beautiful, sometimes horrific. The multiplicity, the refusal to be pinned down to one form, came directly from triple goddess tradition. Christian Ireland might not understand or acknowledge the connection, but the banshee carried the Morrigan's essence forward. Crow folklore preserved her animal associations. Christianity could not eliminate crows. The birds were everywhere, visible, part of daily life, but meanings attached to them survived the religious transition. Crows remained omens of death across Irish and British culture. A crow tapping at your window meant death was coming. A crow landing on your roof warned of approaching doom. A group of crows gathering near your home suggested someone inside would die soon. These beliefs were not new Christian superstitions. They were direct continuations of Celtic attitudes toward crows as the Morrigan's messengers. The mythology stripped away, the divine figure removed, but core belief remained. Crows know about death before humans do. Crows see death approaching. Crows announce death's arrival. That is the Morrigan's function in bird form, preserved as folk wisdom. Rural Irish people continued calling groups of crows a battlefield choir or a murder of crows. That second term especially interests us. Why murder? Because crows gather where death happens. Because their presence means killing occurred or will occur. Because they are associated with violence and ending. The language remembers what the religion forgot. The term murder preserves the connection between crows and death that the Morrigan embodied. Farmers also maintain practices around crows reflecting older religious attitudes, leaving grain offerings for crows, never killing crows unnecessarily, respecting crow nests, speaking carefully around crows lest they report back to the other world. These practices suggest ongoing awareness that crows are not ordinary birds. They are special, connected to forces beyond the visible world. They deserve respect and caution. That is treating crows as sacred, even if Christianity did not officially recognize them as such. The Morrigan's presence lingered in how people related to her bird form. Modern revival brought the Morrigan back as an explicit figure of worship and inspiration. Starting in the 20th century and accelerating through the 21st, people interested in Celtic spirituality, neo-paganism, and goddess worship rediscovered the Morrigan. They read old myths. They researched archaeology. They began honoring her again, building new practices around ancient foundations. This revival created something both old and new. Modern worshippers approaching an ancient deity through contemporary understanding. Modern Morrigan worshippers emphasize different aspects than ancient Celts did. Some focus on her as fierce feminine power, an alternative to gentler goddess archetypes. Some connect with her as a patron of warriors and survivors, someone who helps people face difficult transitions. Some approach her through ecology and nature spirituality, understanding her as necessary death enabling life's continuation. Ancient meanings persist, but modern interpretations add layers the Celts might not have imagined. Writers and artists also brought the Morrigan into popular culture. Irish poet William Butler Yeats referenced her in his work, connecting her to Irish nationalism and identity. Fantasy novels feature her as a powerful, complex character. Video games include her as a playable figure or boss enemy. Comic books adapt her mythology. Each representation spreads her name and story to new audiences, many of whom then seek original myths. Popular culture becomes a gateway to ancient spirituality. This modern revival means the Morrigan now exists in multiple forms simultaneously. She is the banshee warning of death. She is the crow in folklore and superstition. She is the neo-pagan goddess receiving active worship. She is the fantasy character inspiring storytellers. She is the historical figure studied by academics. All these versions coexist, each valid in its own context, all connected to the original Celtic goddess. These three transformations built on each other. The banshee preserved her prophetic death-announcing function for everyday Irish life. Crow folklore maintained her animal symbolism and omen status across centuries. Modern revival reconnected her name and mythology to explicit worship and conscious cultural engagement. Together, these transformations created a survival strategy so successful that the Morrigan arguably remains more culturally relevant today than most Celtic deities. She adapted rather than disappeared. She transformed rather than died. Even a death goddess can achieve immortality. Consider what this survival reveals about the Morrigan's fundamental appeal. She addresses something universal: humanity's need to understand and relate to death. Different eras use different languages, different frameworks, and different practices. But the core need remains. The Morrigan provided answers for Celts. The banshee provided answers for Christian Ireland. Modern neo-paganism provides answers for contemporary seekers. Forms change. The goddess adapts. The need continues. Her survival also demonstrates cultural resilience. Ireland faced invasion, colonization, language suppression, religious conversion, famine, and mass emigration. Celtic culture was attacked from multiple directions across centuries. Yet the Morrigan persisted. Her essence survived in folklore when open worship became impossible. Her stories survived in oral tradition when writing was controlled by hostile forces. Her meanings survived in practice when theology rejected her. She symbolizes Irish cultural continuity through catastrophic change. From understanding her survival and transformation, we arrive at what the Morrigan's ancient story teaches modern people about power, change, and mortality. Ancient wisdom addresses timeless human experiences, Understanding what the Morrigan offers contemporary people reveals that her lessons remain relevant 1,500 years after her worship's peak. We still face death, still navigate change, still need frameworks for understanding loss and transformation. What can we learn from a Celtic war goddess today? On the surface, specific practices appear inapplicable. We do not march into sword battles. We do not worship multiple deities openly. We do not practice animal sacrifice or leave offerings at crossroads. The particular practices are gone, but underlying truths those practices addressed persist. Human mortality has not changed. Our need to find meaning in endings has not disappeared. 3 lessons translate across time: accepting mortality as natural, embracing necessary endings, and finding power in transformation. Accepting mortality as natural counters modern culture's death denial. We live in a time treating death as failure, medical failure, personal failure, a problem to be solved rather than reality to be accepted. We hide dying people in hospitals. We sanitize death's language. We are uncomfortable discussing mortality openly. We pursue life extension obsessively. We frame aging as something to fight, resist, and overcome. This creates profound anxiety. If death is failure, then we are all doomed to fail. If aging is defeat, then time makes losers of everyone. The Morrigan offers different perspective. Death is natural. Death is necessary. Death is part of the cycle making life meaningful and possible. She does not promise death is pleasant. She does not minimize the loss and grief it brings, but she removes judgment. Dying is not failing. It is completing. It is transforming. It is returning borrowed matter to the cycle so others can use it. She teaches that mortality gives urgency and meaning to existence. If you had forever, nothing would matter. Because your time is limited, everything matters. This acceptance changes your relationship with life. If you truly internalize that death is natural and approaching, you stop wasting time on things that do not matter. You prioritize experiences and relationships over accumulation. You take risks because playing it safe cannot actually save you. You forgive more easily because holding grudges wastes precious finite time. You appreciate more deeply because you know nothing lasts. The Morrigan's lesson about mortality is not morbid. It is liberating. It says death will come whether you accept it or not. So acceptance brings peace, while denial brings only anxiety. This does not mean being reckless or suicidal. It means living fully precisely because life ends. Celtic warriors fought fiercely and lived intensely because the Morrigan had taught them life's temporary nature. Modern people can apply this by engaging deeply with the present, knowing it will not last forever. Embracing necessary endings helps us navigate change and loss. We face endings constantly. Relationships end, jobs end, phases of life end, dreams die. Beloved people pass away. Plans fall apart. The old version of yourself stops existing as you grow and change. Every ending involves loss, and loss hurts, but not all endings are negative. Some endings clear space for better things. Some endings release you from situations that were not working. Some endings are necessary for growth. The Morrigan specialized in necessary endings. Her chaos was not random destruction. It was purposeful clearing. She represented winter that must come before spring. She embodied fire burning away dead wood so forests regenerate. She was the editor cutting unnecessary parts from the story. Modern people struggle with endings because we want permanent stability. We want relationships to last forever, jobs to provide lifelong security, plans to unfold exactly as imagined. But life does not work that way. Change is constant. Endings happen. Fighting this reality causes suffering. The Morrigan teaches us to evaluate which endings serve us. Is this ending making space for something better? Is this death of an old pattern allowing new growth? Is this loss teaching me something essential? Not every ending has compensating benefits. Some are simply painful, and that is acceptable. But many endings that seem catastrophic at the time become blessings in retrospect. The relationship that ended made room for healthier love. The job loss forced you toward more meaningful work. The plan's failure revealed better possibilities. The Morrigan's wisdom says trust the cycle. Trust that destruction creates opportunity for creation. Consider how this applies practically. You are facing a major life change. A relationship is ending. A career is shifting. A life phase is closing. Instead of only grieving the loss, you can also ask what this ending makes possible. What was not working in the old situation? What new opportunities does this create? How might this ending serve your growth? You are not denying pain. You are also not denying potential. You are holding both truths simultaneously, just as the Morrigan held both death and renewal. This perspective also helps with smaller daily endings. The end of a good day makes room for rest and tomorrow's possibilities. The end of a project, even one you loved, frees your energy for new work. The end of a pleasant conversation leaves you wanting more, making the next conversation sweeter. The Morrigan's lesson scales from cosmic to mundane. All endings serve. All endings are enabled. All endings participate in life's continuation. Finding power in transformation acknowledges that change is how we survive. You are not the same person you were 10 years ago. You have changed physically, mentally, and emotionally. Cells have replaced themselves. Beliefs have evolved. Relationships have shifted. You have died and been reborn dozens of times while remaining recognizably yourself. This ongoing transformation is how humans adapt, grow, and thrive. But we often resist it. We cling to old identities even when they no longer fit. We fear becoming different people even though we already are different people. The Morrigan embodied transformation. She shifted between woman and crow. She existed as one goddess and three goddesses simultaneously. She proved that identity could be fluid while remaining coherent. She taught that changing form did not mean losing essence. Warriors who died under her watch transformed into something else, but they did not stop being. They changed state, changed shape, and continued existing in new configurations. This understanding removes fear from transformation. When you face necessary personal change, you can remember Morrigan's shifting nature. Becoming someone new does not erase who you were. It adds to your complexity. The shy person who becomes confident does not lose their history of shyness. They incorporate it into a larger identity that now includes confidence. The career change does not delete your previous expertise. It expands your capabilities. The relationship's end does not negate the love you felt. It becomes part of your emotional education. Every transformation adds rather than subtracts. This lesson becomes especially important during identity crises, midlife realizations, retirement transitions, coming out experiences, religious conversions, any moment when you realize you are not who you thought you were or who others expected. The Morrigan says that is acceptable, that is natural, that is powerful. You are shape-shifting like she did. You are discovering new aspects of yourself. The old version does not die in failure. It transforms into something more complete, more authentic, more aligned with who you are becoming. These three lessons work together. You accept mortality as natural, which frees you to live fully. You embrace necessary endings, which allows you to let go of what no longer serves you. You find power in transformation, which enables you to become who you need to be. Together, these create a philosophy of resilience through acceptance. Not passive acceptance that surrenders, active acceptance that engages with reality as it is, not as you wish it were. The Morrigan's lesson is ultimately about life. It is about living with awareness of mortality, change, and transformation. It is about finding strength in facing reality, rather than denying it. It is about participating consciously in the cycle instead of fighting it. Ancient Celts needed this wisdom to survive brutal lives filled with violence and uncertainty. Modern people need the same wisdom to survive our own challenges: anxiety, alienation, environmental crisis, rapid change, and loss of meaning. She remains relevant because the human condition remains constant beneath surface changes. We still face death. We still experience loss. We still transform whether we want to or not. The Morrigan offers framework for navigating these universal experiences with courage, acceptance, and grace. She does not promise it will be easy or painless. She promises it will be meaningful. She promises your endings serve purposes beyond immediate understanding. She promises transformation continues essence even as it changes form. The Phantom Queen, who decided who lives and dies in battle, now teaches us how to live and face our own inevitable endings. Her power persists not through worship, but through wisdom. Her presence lingers not as fear, but as honest recognition of life structure. And her lesson echoes across centuries. Death is natural. Endings enable beginnings. And transformation is how life continues. 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 Life